们接下来还有一位主讲团队，然后在全部的 keynote speaker 之后呢，我们要给大家有一个问答的环节。那请陈老师您稍微等一下，我们有很多研究者有问题需要想问您一下。好，感谢陈老师为我们做的跨边界、跨文化、跨身份、跨媒体的精彩分享。好，接下来我们有请英国 UCL 大学理性能源建筑师团队为我们做图纸分享。UCL 大学理性能源建筑师团队是一个跨学科、跨文化的建筑师研究团队。他们演讲的题目是使用体素作为作用数据结构用于建筑环境中的参与式设计。好，有请 UCL 大学理性能源建筑师团队。
So hi, we're the Rational Energy Architects. I'm Professor currently teaching at the Bartlett School of Architecture, UCL.
Hi, I'm Alberto Fernandez, professor at the University of Chile as well. I'm PhD candidate at UCL as well, teaching there in the same school.
Hi everyone, I'm David Doria. I'm a computational designer and currently teaching at the Bartlett as well.
Cool. So we're actually a team of 5. Unfortunately, due to time zone constraints, behind Nicole was unable to join us. But anyways, we're very, very honored to be here again this year as Keynote. So last year, we were here to share with you our information theory approach to biodesign that focus on computing self-organization. So ways in which we may rethink the relationship between energy and information entropy within the built environment. This year, we thought we would show you our latest experiments and results to exemplify how such theoretical explorations have informed our means to design. So I think we have a real time.
我是工业大学产品设计系的杨帆。今年为吴老师继续担任翻译，然后刚才是这个团队的几位成员，我们分别是阿尔巴托、巴哈和 David Doria，理性能源建构师呢，他们去年已经给我们做了一次分享，他们的工作是基于人工智能、生物启发的这个形状查找以及太阳能设计的融合上。去年他们分享了生物设计信息理论的方法，重点呢在于计算机的自组织这样的方法，这样呢就可以重新思考建筑环境中能源和信息商之间的关系。今年我们继续分享我们最新的实验和结果，以举例来说明这些理论探索如何成为我们设计的一些方法和手段。
Basically, our collective focuses on 3 aspects within bio-inspired solar design, which is bio-inspired form finding, solar design, and human-machine interaction.
这是他们的主要3个方向，一个是呢太阳能的收集和设计，一个是仿生和生物结构的一种形式的探讨，另外一个呢就是人和机器之间的结合以及交互应用。
Yeah, so first we'll introduce the 2 main problems that we're looking at, which are deeply entangled. First is the challenge in designing for distributed power generation, so especially in participatory light harvesting. And in order to do so, our design must comprehend diverse solar conditions and user demands.
现在呢，简要先介绍一下我们现在研究的2个问题，这些问题其实是互相纠缠在一起，相互关联。首先呢是分布发电设计的挑战。那特别是在这个参与收光的方面，做了这一点，我们的设计必须去理解不同的太阳条件下和用户的需求。
Yeah, and the second challenge is to democratize the design process for participatory data input. So this inevitably leads to a rethink of what the Soviet scientist Nikolai Kardashev asked in 1964, which is what would be a technical civilization that could harvest and use all of the energy available on its planet.
第2点呢是使参与这个整个数据输入的设计过程比较民主化，那这不可避免的导致人们去重新思考苏联的这个科学家尼古拉卡尔达斯在1964年提出的这个问题：一个可以收获和使用地球上所有可用能源的技术文明到底是什么？
Yeah, exactly. So Kardashev came up with a scale which measures the level of civilization based on energy. And one of the free energy we can harvest on Earth is, of course, from the sun, right? So for instance, a type 2 civilization would theoretically be able to cover the entire sun with photovoltaic elements. And one of the ways in which is the Dyson sphere, as proposed by the famous physicist Freeman Dyson, who sadly left us last year. So this is a more centralized system in light harvesting. Whereas a type 1 civilization would theoretically be able to at least cover the entire surface of its planet with renewable harvester. So by now we should have realized that we humans can barely be considered as civilized through the lens of energy.
卡德舍夫呢提出了这样的一个问题和高度，能用它来衡量能量，可以是衡量一个社会文明的一个新的水平。那么当然呢，太阳能是我们获得免费能量的这个方式之一。那么在这里边呢，例如第二类的文明理论上可以用光伏元素来覆盖整个的太阳。那么其中第一个方法呢就是戴森球，那么这是著名的物理学家弗里曼戴森提出的。那很不幸他去年离开了我们。那这是一个更集中的极光的系统。从理论意义上来讲呢，第一类文明至少能够用可再生的气去覆盖整个地球表面，去获取这个太阳能。到目前为止，我们应该意识到，通过能量的角度来看，我们的人类几乎还不能被视为是文明的。
Yeah, so the scientific investigation, in fact, inspired many of our cyberpunk imagination. So the Death Star, everybody knows from Star Wars, Dyson Sphere, none of them are actually flat and boring when it comes to harvesting energy. So although we're not living in a sci-fi, that has prompted a critical rethink in how diversity is indeed one of the keys in being energy civilized. So why should our photovoltaic solution be always uniform and flat when the sun and our environment is so dynamic?
事实上，这项科学研究激发了我们许多关于赛博朋克这类的想象。死亡之星、戴森球体，在收获能量方面，它们都非常有趣。虽然我们不是生活在科幻的小说里边，但这促使我们批判性的去重新思考，多样性和多变性的确是能源文明的关键之一。当太阳和环境都表现为动态的时候，为什么我们的光伏解决方案却始终是均匀和平整的呢？
Yeah, so in answering these questions, we realize that we must not look too far but at our own terrestrial and aquatic biology, which already cover the entire Earth with distributed light harvesting capacities. So it is showing us basically an alternative to what intelligence might look like beyond our centralized nervous system. And from here, we can already get a sense of the scale of the problem that we're dealing with. The amount of data from natural to social, which has to be comprehended, is beyond human capacities. So for that, we must collaborate with our machines and across disciplinary and territorial borders.
在回答这个问题的时候，我们意识到我们不能看得特别的远，而要看到我们现在自己的陆地和水生的生物，它已经是以分布式的收光能力覆盖了整个地球，也就是台湾的这个理论。当我们它给我们展示了一种可以替换的类似于中枢神经，并且超过这种方式的智能的替代方案。在这里呢，我们已经可以感觉到这个手理问题的这种规模到自然到社会的数据量，其实有点超出了人。
Cool. So thanks to advancements in nanotechnology, such as carbon nanotubes, we may further mimic energy exchange mechanisms of self-organizing entities and their diverse topologies. At the same time, each city has different renewable capacities and solar conditions, so diversity is indeed a key in designing for devices that may adapt to different local contexts. And in order to have diversity, we must communicate, but not all designers speak the same modeling language, nor are we all proficient in the same software space, so let alone general users. The main problem that we encounter is indeed data flow, especially regarding how different algorithms may communicate between one another in formulating a collaborative intelligence. So that may synthesize design and intuition, biological self-organization, and artificial intelligence.
由于碳纳米管等纳米技术的进步，我们可以进一步的去模仿自组织生物的能量交换机制，以及多样化的透布结构，以及局部的解析。那么与此同时呢，每个城市都有不同的可再生能力和太阳能条件。多样性确实是设计可能适应不同当地情况设备的关键。为了具有多样性，我们必须沟通，但并非所有的设计师都会去讲共同的这种建构和模型的语言。那么我们也都有不同精通的这种软件的这个空间，那更不用说普通的用户了。因此，我们遇到的主要问题呢，其实是一个数据流的问题，特别是关于不同算法在制定协作智能时，如何能够相互通信，分析合成设计师的直觉、生物自组织和人工智能这样的一些问题。
Yeah, so our project AI Inform basically developed distributed workflows and combinatorial pipelines with open source tools to empower individuals with computational skill making. Distributed means that it has the potential to enhance inclusivity in participatory design from peer-to-peer, data-to-data exchanges, where each component on a pipeline can be arranged according to design specificity, thus being combinatorial. And we define AI as agent or rule-based systems with machine learning systems. For the former, we focus on cellular automata and evolutionary genetic algorithms. For the latter, we experiment with generative adversarial networks, GANs. So the challenge of integrating them comes in two folds. First is data sharing between software without proprietary constraints, and second is the knowledge sharing between people without physical constraints. Now, of course, our effort is not unique, so there are a lot of projects out there looking at similar problems.
那么我们的这个项目叫做 AI in Java， 使用了开源的工具，开发出了分布式的工作流程和组合的管道，来增强个人的计算技能创造能力。分布式它意味着它有可能通过对等数据到数据交流的方式来增强参与者对设计的包容性。其中管道上的每个组件都可以根据设计的特殊性去进行排列，形成是组合式的。我们将人工智能定义为基于代理规则的系统和机器学习系统。对于前者呢，我们专注于用细胞自动机制 CA 和进化遗传算法。对于后者，我们尝试生成对抗网络。整个的它们有两部分的挑战，首先是没有专有的限制软件之间的数据共享。第二呢，人与人之间在没有物理约束的情况下可以共享知识。当然，我们这些努力工作的内容并不是独一无二的，有一些项目也有类似的研究正在进行。Okay.
Yeah, for instance, what you're seeing here is Pixar, which engineered the Universal Scene Description as a framework for interchange of 3D computer graphics data. So this basically enables a collaborative interface between any modeling software. And the logic behind USD is that it describes the aggregation and distribution of 3D assets within a scene to resolve proprietary constraints. So you can imagine how in the future a network of designers would be able to model the entire city together in this collaborative virtual interface. And the task of building API between different software is an enterprise-grade research and development project. So our question is, what can we do as individuals, and how can we autonomously contribute to a problem-solving network? So this highlights the importance of standardization.
例如呢，皮克斯将通用场景描绘设计为 3D 计算机图形数据交换的一个框架，来实现任何建模软件之间的协作界面。通过场景描绘这个背后的逻辑是，它会描绘了场景中 3D 以资产的形式聚合和分布，来解决这个没有约束的事情。你可以想象，未来一个设计师网络将如何在这个协作的空间中一起塑造这个城市，在不同软件之间构建应用程序的编程接口。这个任务是一个企业级的研发项目。那么作为个人，我们可以做什么？我们如何自主的为这个解决问题的网络做出贡献？那在这里呢，标准化就是一个非常重要的一个问题。
So our approach to these challenges follows a very similar logic, but focusing on economic distributive tools that are readily available to any individual. So like you and me, in front of our computers. On a technical level, it includes exploring the use of voxel as a universal data structure so that individuals who are fluent in different coding or modeling languages can communicate with one another using the same language, the same data structure. So basically, voxel is a little bit like a pixel, but in 3D. It is a set of discrete data points that are regularly spaced and comprise a three-dimensional grid. So there are certain benefits in doing so. First, it can act as a geometry proxy for complex 3D models to be streamlined during data processing. For instance, we can simply encode XYZ and RGB data of architectural elements, as opposed to processing every mesh surface in a model. And secondly, it helps to preserve the integrity of data when it is being exchanged from different computational interface. Like for instance, we work from Houdini to Rhino Grasshopper to machine learning in custom Python frameworks. All of these data translation is through voxel. And it serves the purpose of integrating various AI algorithms coming from sources that are both proprietary and open source.
我们应对这些挑战的方法其实遵循着是类似的逻辑，但侧重于任何人都可以随时获得这种经济分配的工具，3D 模型。在技术层面呢，它包括探索使用 三维像素作为通用的数据结构单元，以便使用不同的编码或建模的语言。那么每个人呢可以使用相同的 3D 语言去进行相互的通信。三维元素其实就是一个像素，但在 3D 中，它是一组定期间隔的离散的数据点，由三维网络组成。这样做有一定的好处。首先呢，它可以作为复杂 3D 几何模型的这个基本元素一个代表来简化数据的处理。例如我们可以简单的对架构元素的 XYZ 和 RGB 数据及坐标和颜色数据进行编码，而不是处理模型中的每一个网格的表面。其次，当从自定义的爬虫框架中产生的电影特效、犀牛的参数化到机器的学习不同计算机接口数据进行交换时，它有助于保持数据的完整性，用于集成来自于专有和开源的各种 AI 算法。
Yeah, so David is going to talk a little bit more specifically about artificial intelligence.
Artificial intelligence is the scientific field that studies and tries to create digital algorithms to solve problems that are often associated with intellectual labor. So it's not necessarily accomplished by imitating humans, and the deployment of AI involves the development of machine learning algorithms, done around the will to artificially reason over complex questions and produce specific results. And machine learning is the study of computer algorithms that are not explicitly programmed to do a task, but learn how to do it and improve automatically through experience and data samples.
基本上就是说，人工智能呢，其实它是基于去创造一些数码的算术方式，但其实它不一定要像人类一样去想的，它也可以把大自然很多不一样的那些智慧去放到这个算术的方式里面。然后我们研究的基本上都是这个机器学习，然后它也不是我们告诉那个电脑要怎么做，而是电脑自己学会怎么做。
An example of a machine learning algorithm that we are interested in is fix-to-fix. It is a conditional generative adversarial network, or a CGAN. The objective of it is to generate an image from another, that is, an input, reproducing the translation that happens, that is intended to happen in between them. So it learns how to transform an image from one to another, learning from a training set. To achieve this, the algorithm trains two models that compete against each other. But how can we use it in architecture, which is fundamentally three-dimensional? Our solution seeks to use the voxel, as does provide mentioned, as a medium for data. So in this example that we have on screen, we were addressing the problem of how to recognize rooms in an architectural configuration that uses movable walls. The solution encodes the space into voxels that are translated into pixels, producing images to train a pix-to-pix algorithm.
对，然后我们就是其中一个关注的一个机器学习，就是叫 pathfinders。然后它怎么运作呢？就是我们去给它一个目标，然后玩一个游戏。我们让两个人工智能他们一起玩一个游戏，然后其中一方达到一个 equilibrium 的话，他们就算赢了。然后这就是一个最好的一个状态。然后我们怎么去让他们玩这个游戏？就是我们会有两个不同的数据库，然后每个数据库里面有一些最好的数据，还有最坏的数据，然后他们就要去分辨哪一个是好的，哪个是坏的。然后等到他们整个学习完成了以后，他们就知道哦，原来这样去排列一些建筑的一些 element 的话，就会是最好的一个排列方式。然后我们怎么样去让他看得见那个建筑的这些不同的小东西呢？就是用一个 voxel 作为一个数据的媒体。
And after the training set is produced, or in other words, a good amount of images that we can use to train, the algorithm is trained and it becomes capable of recognizing in images different rooms. By translating the images back into voxels, we can recognize them into 3D space. This means that the voxel is used to carry spatial data about the building into the algorithm, so that it can operate indirectly in 3D.
对，很多人以为就是人工智能可能不知道他们看见东西是很虚幻，其实不是的。他们现在就是年纪还算比较小一点，所以他们其实只能看见二维的东西。那么，所以我们作为一个建筑设计师呢，我们的任务就是让这个人工智能从一个二维的东西能够 认识到其实这些二维的点呢是一个三维的物体，所以我们的做法呢就是用这个 voxel， 因为 voxel 基本上就是 pixel， 可是它是 3D 嘛，然后就是经过这样的一个二维三维的一个翻译，我们就帮助这个人工智能去学习。
And voxels can also be used to help to train reinforcement learning agents, which is a different kind of machine learning algorithm that learn by receiving rewards and penalties according to their actions in a given environment. In this example that we have on screen, we use the voxel grid as the environments that a machine learning agent can navigate and populate with, and populate architectural components on. So the voxels are not only used to encode position, but also data such as its state and the component that it is occupying. And by navigating the voxel grid, the agent can learn in a manner that is scale agnostic, something that is really hard to overcome when you're trying to do machine learning in 3D environments.
其实机器学习也不是那么抽象的，就像你可以在左上角看见那个 pigman， 他在学习如何去吃掉东西又不被抓着。我们其实这个建筑的建模用的原理也是一样的，我们去叫一个 agent， 他要在这个三维的空间里面找到最好的一个 pathway， 然后就把那些立方体换成是我们有用的建筑的 element。
So going back to Pixabix, we have also researched the use of bias in sets as a means to embed intentional data into automated processes. In this example, we have investigated translating drawing gestures, like hand-drawn gestures, into voxel grids to create tower aggregations.
对，所以这边其实在发生什么呢？就是一个设计师，他在一个立方体上面做出一些很人性化的一些指示，然后这个机器就要找出这些指示中最短的一个 pathway， 然后把它连上，很简单的一个学习过程。然后这个就是我们用一个太阳的数据作为一个指示，然后让机器透过这个太阳的数据的强度去把这些不同的立方体连上。
So circling back into our research into bio-inspired solar designs, we sought to embed complex and computationally heavy processes together with design intent, all of that as bias into machine learning algorithms. By extracting data from different points of a pipeline that includes genetic algorithms, solar analysis, and generative modeling, it is possible to produce a training set for face-to-face. Again, the voxel here is used as a data medium, carrying information through different platforms and producing the images we need in training sets. It allows for compression and approximation of all of these complex steps into a lightweight, easy-to-run model. In other words, it makes it possible to automate a process that uses machine analysis together with design intention and intuition.
是的，所以我们其实整个 research 呢，就是在想我们怎么用不一样的生物的数据、人类的数据，还有一些太阳的数据，我们怎么让把这些全部放进一个 pipeline 里面。然后你可以看见这里，我们有不同的城市数据、太阳数据，然后它们呢就会放进一个genetic algorithm， 是一个 genetic algorithm 里面。然后呢，这个其实是一个承代性的一个算法，就是说它会把不好的一些带给驱走，把好的留下来。然后通过这一个分类的过程呢，这个机器学习就会从人还有另外那条算术里面学到，其实我们分别是怎么想事情的，然后它就会可以把这个很复杂的一个算法用很短的时间重新算出来。好处是什么呢？就是不管我们再去问它任何问题，关于其他城市的也好，它也可以很快的可能几分钟内就把我们几个小时的一些运法给回答出来了。
Fault finding, as we know, is a design methodology based on constant iterations over a series of shapes regulated by physical constraints. In this particular case, as we can see in this slide, our research is led by computational fault finding, accelerating the way in which a form follows transformations. By the action of data, looking for optimal possible solutions based on performance, creating different variations that enrich the design process, being an architect of parameters instead of unique straight solutions.
好，谢谢吴老师刚才帮忙翻译。那我继续。 那我们知道呢，这个造型是一种基于一系列的受物理约束调节的形状，在不断的迭代时间下的这个设计方法。在这个特定的情况下，我们的研究以计算来形成这个形式为主导，加快了数据作用的形式追随转换这种方式，根据性能寻找出最佳的可能的解决方案，创造不同的变化，来丰富设计过程，成为参数的架构师，而不是独特的直接解决方案。
In this data framework, bio-inspired shapes are a fascinating starting point of our research, from where we can explore answers to our questions, learning about how natural systems are evolving generation by generation, improving different aspects of how self-optimized structures are created for specific purposes.
No worries.
在这个数据框架中呢，生物启发的造型的这个形状是一个迷人的起点，研究入口。我们可以从那里探索我们的答案，了解自然系统是如何代代相传，改善各种特定目的下结构的自我优化。以这个想法为主要目标，第一步是通过程序建模和可视化的编程，那么综合这样的系统，创建出对设计高度适用的开放工作流程。
With this idea as the main target, the first step has been the synthetical replication of natural inspired systems by procedural modeling and/or visual programming, creating a foundational first step in an open workflow highly adapted by design. Understanding this open design strategy based on digital form finding, we use specifically in our research solar radiation as an information coming from the environment as the catalyzer that leads the evolutionary solver implemented in the pipeline of our workflow, generating versions of our prototype shapes, firstly testing and transforming the natural inspired form, understanding its energy capture possibilities, including orientation, angles, slopes, and proportions.
基于这种数字形式的开放设计策略，我们在研究中专门使用太阳辐射作为来自环境的信息作为催化剂，在工作流程管道中实现的进化求解器生成原型形状的版本，首先测试和转换的自然灵感形態，了解其能量捕捉的可能性，包括方向、角度、斜率、比例。
After this part, we introduce CA and aggregation as translator of previous shapes, coming from a natural inspired source, generating an abstract solution that looks into the best original source model to a special solution which reloads the shapes, data, and the energy capture performance into a series of new static models with several possible options as solutions for the system. This step allows us to transfer information from the study model to an analytical point cloud, creating the link between this part, evolutionary analysis, to a machine learning process based on pix-to-pix. The results from this part are returning later to the Grasshopper visual algorithm, accelerating the generation of new possible solutions in a fraction of time versus the previous genetic algorithm evolver.
在这一部分之后呢，我们介绍了用细胞自动机和聚合作为来自自然灵感源的初始形态的一个建模器，生成了一个抽象的结构。那么这个结构着眼于原始原模型的最佳效果，并将其重新加载到一系列新的研究模型当中，并有几种可能的选项作为系统的解决方案。此步骤允许我们将信息从研究模型传输到分析语言。在这一部分，进化分析与基于像素化的这个机器学习过程之间建立联系。在这一部分的结果稍后将回归到参数化的视觉算法，与之前的进化演化器相比，在极短的时间内加快了新的可能解决方案的生成。
In any case, GA and machine learning are complementary in this pipeline. The first one is feeding the second one, and then this one is returning more information to the pipeline after hundreds of previous points, transferred and training set images that are teaching how to create new possibilities based on this data coming from the workflow between bio-inspired form finding parts together with stereo automatas and aggregations, genetic algorithms, and Galapagos and Ladybug as solar radiation analysis tool.
那无论如何呢，进化器和自我学习在这个管道中是相互联系和互补的。第一个 会喂养第二个管道，然后这个是之前数百个点，将更多的信息反馈到管道，作为训练集成图像的传输。这些图像正在教授如何根据来自于生物启发的形式，部分与聚合、遗传算法和全景相机作为太阳辐射分析工具的工作流程中，这些数据将创造新的可能性。
As we need to return all this process to inhabitable space, and finally to an architectural set of solutions, the last input of our pipeline is the reinterpretation of this data to a building information model as a better information management process, but led by this form-finding, CA, GA, radiation, and machine learning data. The point clouds and voxels that are constantly emerging from this process, walls, slabs, columns, roofs, as an example, are constantly reinterpreted in this workflow. In this sense, finally, our shapes are not anymore just digital sculptures. Now are intelligent models that are constantly using information from the environment to beam, as reinterpretation that allows us to understand a new set of possible scenarios with a clear focus on space with possible human uses, but with a clear link with energy performance throughout the whole design process.
那最终呢，我们还是需要将这些所有的过程回归到可居住的空间设计和解决方案当中。因此，我们的管道最后输入，那么是由造型、聚合、遗传、迭代等方案这些数据重新解释为建筑模型的信息和元素。从这个过程流程中不断的出现的云点和像素，可以重新解释为架构元素，例如墙壁、平板、柱子、屋顶等等。从这个意义上来讲，我们的形状最终不再只是数字雕塑，现在是智能模型。它们不断的使用来自环境的信息到建筑模型作为重新解释，使我们能够理解一套新的可能场景与能源性有明确联系的可应用于人类空间的居住设计。
Hello from me as well. Now, let's look at how we approach learning from organisms and how this can contribute to our design process. We're very much interested in exploring organisms that adapt to their environment and harvest the maximum amount of energy. This exploration takes place in two strands. One is to understand the morphology of the organism. Second is to study the behavior of such organisms and how they have a symbiotic relationship with their environments and its inhabitants. Here we can see an example of a biopolymer infused with algae with the aim to create a symbiotic relationship with the skin and the environment. Within this process, we use computation to explore the principles behind growth and also to simulate and speculate the response and interdependencies of the organisms with the environment. Within the field of material science and technology, there have been fascinating advancements, and we can start seeing how this could be applied within the next 5 to 10 years. As a fabrication strategy, we're keen to explore adaptable solutions with reduced environmental impact and also looking at using the minimum amount of materials. It is also key to start considering the life cycle of such systems and how they get integrated with our built environment. Digging deeper into understanding technologies that will mature enough for mass customization within a decade, we speculate on how such structures could be built and how we may crowdsource efforts in the field. So for this, we have carried out international workshop series along COMICAT conferences. We develop with our students a critical understanding towards the synthesis between various forms of intelligence. Thus, the overarching principles of the concept sit under the umbrella of participatory design. This can be seen as various levels of exchanges, so peer-to-peer collaboration, machine and environment symbiosis, and human-machine interactions. It has been a great learning experience working with our students as we were exposed and introduced to areas of the world that we wouldn't have been otherwise. We have had students from Eurasia to American continents, each contributing their unique knowledge, solar data, and climate issues of their home, and get to know interesting biological species across the globe. Most importantly, every context has varying socioeconomic capacities and cultural technologies. We have selected 8 projects to share with you and see how the students have been pushing for local implementation of the brief and their participants' own critical variation of the pipeline. For instance, the project Lichenic Spherical Blobs introduced us to the highlands. The student learned from lichen in the design of the solar and fog harvesting installation. In the project, we can see a symbiotic relationship where algae cells do the photosynthesis while being fed with nutrients and water is gathered from the surrounding tissue. The growth pattern is based on Laplacian growth and Safram-Stalion's instability model. Whereas in this project, the students investigated reflective light harvesting, applying solar concentrator in high-rise areas in London to tackle problems of overshadowing from tall buildings and the lack of interactive spaces and sensorial simulation. They speculated on light harvesting elements with fiber optic cables to ensure good distribution of light, despite the canopy-like typology. They developed these very beautiful geometries coming from fractal patterns which adapted to solar data input at different levels, creating a full fractal planar structure with specific mirror focal points. They also put delicate treatments on the ground condition, creating focused light meeting areas with the play of light in the plaza that gives special attention to changes in season, directing more light to the ground in winter and less in the summer. They integrated light focusing canopy devices and local harvesting columns where different urban elements collaborate in power generation.
So thank you, Nico, for recording your presentation. So another interesting project is Solia, which looked at light harvesting farms in dense urban areas and high-risk disaster zones. The structural form was inspired by mangroves and derived using fractals, the fractal logic of Julia sets. The structural anatomy of mangroves has evolved to maximize the gain of light and oxygen through its breathing roots, called pneumatophores. Sorry if that's spelled properly. These roots bend upwards, form from the submerged sections and have a porous cellular structure to facilitate the flow of oxygen required for its survival. In smaller scales, the mathematical principle behind the mangrove's growth pattern are similar to fractal antenna, which has an enhanced wave transmission and reception through reflection and diffusion.
霍利亚这个项目研究的是密集城市地区和高风险灾区的轻度收光的方式。结构形式受红树木的启发，并使用了茱莉亚级的分形逻辑导出。红树木的结构解剖学已经进化，通过被称为气林的呼吸根，能够最大限度地增加光和氧气。这些根从水下部分向上弯曲，并具有多孔的细胞结构，以促进其生存所需的氧气流动。在较小的尺度上，红树木生长模式背后的数学原理类似于分形天线。分形天线通过反射和传播增强了波的传输和接收的能力。
So by applying the Julia set, the aggregation simulates the growth patterns of mangroves to obtain maximized direct and indirect solar energies, as well as maintains the habitation of the dense community among structures in normal status and emerging status. Several primitives are generated following rules of Julia sets to achieve high-resolution fractal light structure and diverse geometries to accommodate various conditions. Therefore, the high-resolution fractal structure can be applied with solar silicon, whose nanostructures are engraved with set fractal shape so as to strongly enhance light trapping from both direct sunlight and low-angle water reflection.
通过茱莉亚级呢，结合模拟红树木的生长模式，以获得最大的直接和间接的太阳光。并在处于正常状态和紧急状态的结构中，能够保持密集群落的居住状态。根据茱莉亚级的规则生成了几个原型，以实现高分辨率分形光和多样化的几何形状，以适应各种条件。因此，高分辨率分形结构可以应用于太阳硅，其纳米结构有这种分形形状，从而增强阳光直射和低角度 水平反射的光线捕捉。
And also, the project Bioluminescent Solar System speculated on neural lightning networks. The biological inspiration originates from dinoflagellates known as animalcules, which cause the sparkling light in seawater. The light-emitting system of dinoflagellates, based on the sense of motion distribution principle of dinoflagellates, forms flocking behavior. This underwater intelligent environment forms a neural network of sorts, and using the Watson algorithm, it is then possible to create artificially the topological networks associated with the coordinates of facade connections in space. The Watson algorithm makes a decision on whether couples of cells are connected or not based on their distance. The strategy and its physical form manifestation creates an interaction between solar devices and users, as well as the neighborhood infrastructure.
那么这个项目呢是神经照明网络上推测生物发光太阳系这个项目名称。那么这个仿生的启发是来源于鞭毛草，是一个水下的发光的一个水下植物、水下生物。那么这个发光的聚集系统，是基于不同的鞭毛草之间的运动，然后集群行为的一种发生。那么这个水下的智能环境，那么就形成了一种这个神经类似于神经网络的结构。那么这个算法是基于Waxman 这个的想法。那么这种想法是一种非常人工的，然后拓扑的一种网络结构，是基于这种不同的外观和联系之间形成的空间。那么 Waxman 这种算法呢，给我们的一个结论，是否是这些细胞是联系的还是不联系的？那么这种策略可以帮助我们在物理形式上去理解，邻居之间的距离和空间是否可以去产生一些关联。
And recent material advancements provide the opportunity to design diverse light harvesting devices, including bioluminescent materials that absorb energy in daytime and release it back to the environment during low light conditions. Our workshop participants speculate on the possibility of an urban flux system replacing street lights that are powered by diesel-generated electricity.
最近的材料进步为设计各种采光的设备提供了很多新的机会，包括白天可以吸收能量，并在弱光条件下将其释放回环境中的生物发光材料。我们的工作坊的参与者推测了城市集群系统的可能性，以取代柴油发电供电的路灯。
Well, the next project is particularly interesting. Working across two different scales of voxel aggregations, one that controls the distribution of light harvesting elements around the main avenue of Tehran, another which controls the formal topology with solar data.
这个项目特别有趣，那么是跨两个尺度的三维像素的集合，一个呢是控制德黑兰主要通道的周围收光元素的分布，那么另一个是使用太阳能数据去控制这种形式上的拓扑。
As inspired by melanin, a natural skin pigment that helps organisms in adapting to solar radiation, the group speculate on dye synthesized solar cells that can turn dark in optimal lighting conditions to absorb more energy and turn light in low lighting conditions to enable transparency. Dye-sensitive solar cells are also low cost and semi-flexible, which may enable the double curve surface here that is inspired by mushroom morpho-elastic developments and maximize surface growth.
受黑色素呢，黑色素呢是一种帮助生物适应太阳辐射的天然皮肤色素。那么受这种黑色素的启发，该小组推测了染料敏感的太阳能电池。这些太阳能电池可以在最佳的照明条件下变暗，以吸收更多的能量，并在弱光的条件下发光，以提高透明度。染料敏化太阳能电池也是低成本和半柔性的。那么这使受模糊形态、弹性发育和表面生长最大化的双曲面形成了一种材料的可能性。
Halfway across the earth to Dubai, some students look at adaptive envelope system for skyscrapers. The scheme design can adapt to new or existing building for its freestanding structure. Harvest light not throughout solar cells, but throughout facilitating microecologies to grow on the facade. Not only does it cycle carbon, it may also recycle green greywater throughout the pipes for green wall irrigation.
我们再看到这个迪拜，一些学生研究了摩天大楼的这种自适应的外墙系统。那么这种外墙的皮肤设计可以适应新的或者现有的建筑，因为它的结构是非常独立的。收获光不是通过太阳能电池，而是通过促进微观生态在立面上的生长。它不仅是可碳循环的，还可以通过管道回收灰水进行绿墙的灌溉。
The envelope was generated with solar analysis to locate spots that accumulate the most and least radiation. Where host plants or parasites would be grown respectively, as the latter has no chlorophyll and are unable to photosynthesize. But this particular parasite is a local species, the R.E.Ar, which has high medical value, low primary productivity, thus it is energy efficient and forms symbiotic relationships with the rest of the structure. It is an all-flower-bearing parasite that is still becoming engendered right now. The students were hoping that throughout such projects it may raise awareness around the species and make more information available for the public in its conservation.
这个外墙皮肤是通过太阳分析生成的，以定位辐射累积最多和最少的斑点。宿主植物和寄生虫将会分别生长，因为寄生虫没有叶绿素，不能进行光合作用。但这种特殊的寄生虫是当地的物种，沙漠凤心子。具有很高的医学价值，生产率非常低，因此它具有能源的效率，并与结构的其他部分产生共生的关系。它是一种全花寄生虫，现在仍然是面临着这个濒临灭绝的情况。学生们希望通过这些项目，可以提高人们对该物种的认识，并向公众提供更多的保护信息。
Yeah, so looking at another low-cost attempt, we have come to South America, where some of our students introduce us to the porous terracotta water filters that are extremely economical to be implemented. They call this project Desert Fountain, basically a vapor and light harvesting public installation composed of vapor harvesters that traps water vapor during condensation at dawn. So the microstructure is inspired by blue butterfly wings that change color through capillary condensation of vapors, so also mentioned by the professor before. Stem pipelines are inspired by plants such as psyllium, which filters water through small pores on its stem. So the global topology is inspired by corals, which maximize surface to volume ratio, and a water tank that incorporates a terracotta filter for double filtering.
还有一个低成本的尝试，我们的一个学生向我们介绍多孔陶土的滤水器，这些过滤器实施起来非常的经济。我们称为沙漠喷泉，由5个部分组成的蒸汽和光收集的公共装置。那么第一个部分呢，水晶球太阳能浓缩器，通过将阳光集中在焦点来获取最大限度的提高收光性能，捕获的能量可用于基于当地的废水，最大限度的减少耗散。第二点呢，蒸汽收集机在黎明时分凝时可以捕捉水蒸气。其微观结构灵感来自于蓝色的蝴蝶的翅膀，这些翅膀通过蒸汽的毛细血管凝结可以变为蓝色。之前的教授也提到过。第三个呢是茎管的灵感来自于木质部的植物，木质部植物通过茎上的小孔隙来过滤水。全球拓扑的灵感来自于珊瑚，珊瑚最大的提高了地表与体积的比率。第四点呢是结构的支持。第5点是一个水箱，包括了一个低价的陶土多孔滤水器，用于双重过滤。
Yeah, so the last two projects we'll be sharing with you looking at more universal conditions. So this biocell project explores the potential of different formal topology. The most interesting one is a sphere. So some people would put motors behind flat silicon panels so that it chases the sunlight like a sunflower, but the motors itself consume energy. So what the topology of a sphere does is that at any time during the day, half of the surface is exposed to sunlight. And when this is coupled with smart materials such as perovskite, which works perfectly in low lighting conditions, diffuse light or even reflected light from water, passive light harvesting system can be designed that are more adaptive to universal conditions.
最后的这两个项目是应用在各种通用的条件下。biocell 这个项目探索了不同形式拓扑的潜力。最有趣的是这个球体。那么有些人呢，把它和马达放到了一个平板硅胶的后面，这样它像向日葵一样可以追逐阳光，马达也会消耗能量。球体的拓扑结构是在白天的任何时候，当它在低光条件下工作的钙钛矿等智能材料，漫射光甚至来自于水中的光反射，适应更普遍条件下被动收光的系统相结合时，它就会暴露在阳光之下。
Yeah, so this last project questioned if it is possible to have light harvesting structures that are transparent at the same time. So we're much inspired by luminescent solar concentrator, which can be fabricated as flexible thin films, where light will bounce up and down within a material, transporting the solar energy to the edge of the panel, to the solar cell. So this basically means that we will free up the main surface area for transparency, and this gives new opportunities of turning large area of building surface in cities as light harvesting surface. This aims at liberating solar energy system from being merely on the roof, but on buildings' corners unused against reflective surfaces, and even bringing them to indoors, exploring the modest renewable energy capacities within urban contexts.
最后的这个项目是在讨论是否有透明的光收集的结构。发光太阳能收缩器 RSC 可以制成柔性的薄膜，光线在材料中上下弹跳，将太阳能输送到面板边缘到太阳能电池，释放表面来获得透明度。这将为城市的大片建筑表面变成光收集表面提供了新的机会。它旨在解放太阳能的系统，使其不仅仅是在屋顶上，而是在反射表面甚至室内建造未使用的角落，这样可以探索城市环境中湿度的可再生能源能力。
好，来到我们最后了，我直接用中文说吧。我们就是那个结论，就是说，其实用人工智能呢，它并不是一个非常 fashionable， 就是大家都在用，所以我们也在用，而是它是一个可以帮助科学家还有设计师通过同一个命题共同去创造的一个机会。所以我们觉得这个太阳能发电呢，其实不可以只靠人类还有我们的手去做，而是我们要学习如何跟我们的机器啊，然后如何跟我们的生物去学习的一个过程。然后我们希望未来的5年到10年，虽然刚才我们的那个团队也有介绍过可以怎么把这些东西制造出来，可是希望5年到10年左右的时间，我们全部的城市都可以自己给自己供电，然后不需要再很 passive 很被动的去吸收一个能源。然后如果我们非常谢谢你们邀请我们，也非常谢谢杨给我们一个翻译的过程。对，然后我的团队他们现在是凌晨，所以大家都是精神有点不振了。可是如果你想要更深入的去看一下我们跟我们学生的一些作品，还有刚才的整个过程，你可以 scan 这个 QR code， 然后就可以到我们的一个立体的 VR gallery 去看。然后最后谢谢大家，然后也希望我们从今以后有多一点的交流，可以把我们的一些研究带回国内这样。谢谢。
谢谢。
谢谢。
好，谢谢，感谢 R.E.Ar Architects 团队，
感谢大家。
感谢给我们带来从新的视角进行建筑设计研究的分享。